Hello, everybody, and welcome to Penguins to Go, your daily dose of Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. You can find us on YouTube at Inside the Penguins or anywhere you get your podcasts from. Well, the Pittsburgh Penguins are just about 3.5 weeks away from the opening of their 2023 training camp. And when you look at the roster heading into camp, yes, Kyle Dubas did his best to start fresh as Penguins president and general manager. He's brought in plenty of new faces. He overhauled both the defense and the bottom six, of course, highlighted by the Erik Karlsson trade. But his detractors are still there. And his detractors, whether that be Penguins fans that are skeptical about what he's going to be able to do in Pittsburgh, or Maple Leafs fans that are still salty that he left Toronto after he said he wasn't going to go to any other team even if he did leave Toronto. His detractors, whoever they are pointing to the lack of scoring depth on the forward side of this roster. But there is one player that could surprise in 2023 that I don't think enough people have talked about in the conversation about what Kyle Dubas has done for this bottom six, and that's Andreas Johnsson. Or Johnson. It's switched back and forth throughout his career. But he signed a one-year deal worth $800,000 against the salary cap for this season. Signed it back on July 7th, so he wasn't a day one signing. He was still a week one signing in free agency. Obviously, the big take on Johnsson was that he previously played under Kyle Dubas in Toronto. The first 6 seasons that he played AHL professional hockey, AHL and NHL combined. He started with a couple seasons with the Toronto Marlies. Now, in his time with the Toronto Maple Leafs, he scored 30 goals and 67 points in 125 games. Not bad for a bottom six guy. Now, his role with the Leafs was probably the best years of his career. He did have an incredibly lucky rookie season with the puck luck. His shooting percentage was really high. He was playing with really good players. He had a great rookie year. And some can look at his statistics and say it's been all downhill from there. Some could say it's probably more a regression to the mean. It is probably what it is. But Johnsson has showed the ability to play the up-tempo offensive style that Pittsburgh Penguins head coach Mike Sullivan is hoping that the Pittsburgh Penguins can get back to this season. It's the style that the Penguins won Stanley Cups with in 2016 and 2017, just as Andreas Johnsson was actually making his name at the NHL level. And while Johnsson last season had the worst moments of his professional career, getting placed on waivers by the New Jersey Devils, getting sent back to the AHL for the first time since breaking into the league initially with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and then, of course, getting traded to the San Jose Sharks a little bit later in the season, it seems as if he is primed for a real show-me year at the NHL level. Now, his spot on the Pittsburgh Penguins at the NHL level is far from being solidified. In fact, he is going to be battling in one of the most competitive camp battles the Penguins have seen in the past 5 years, which is basically 2 or 3 bottom 6 spots, as well as that extra forward spot. It could go to him. It could go to Sam Poulin. It could go to Valtteri Puustinen. It could go to Finny Hinostroza, who was signed the same day that Johnsson was brought into Pittsburgh. It could go to Alex Nylander, and so on and so forth. There's going to be a lot of competition for the Penguins' bottom 6 slots. But when I look at Andreas Johnsson, I see somebody that could break out as not just earning a roster spot in that camp battle, but becoming the Pittsburgh Penguins' secret weapon on the roster. While his career high of 20 goals is probably not in the realm of realism when you're trying to project what he's able to do, even at his best, if all things go right, I still don't know if I would project Andreas Johnsson to be a 20-goal scorer for the Penguins in 2023. But the Penguins may find that he is a reliable third-line winger that will change the pace of the bottom 6. You look at the bottom 6 as constructed, and some of the players that are, quote, locks to make the roster. Jeff Carter, you find it hard to believe that they're not going to have him at least start the season on the roster. Lars Eller, Noel Acciari, Matt Nieto, good players, but none of them by any means are labeled as speedsters. They're not slow, but they're not speedsters. Andreas Johnsson, even at 28 years old, can bring a change of pace that will make the Pittsburgh Penguins' bottom six harder to play against. Not only that, but he's a pretty good finisher. All of his shooting percentages in seasons that weren't his worst season ever, which was basically last season, all of his shooting percentages are up around 11, 12%, which is league average. But hey, when you're a bottom six player and you look at what the Penguins had last season in the bottom six, which was a bunch of players whose shooting percentages were far below league average. I'm talking Danton Heinen. I'm talking Zach Aston Reese. I know he wasn't with the Penguins last season, but the entire time that he was with the Penguins, his shooting percentage was very low. I'm talking Ryan Poehling. I'm talking Josh Archibald. I'm talking... There was one in my brain that literally just is Teddy Bluger. Teddy Bluger was a perfect example. Johnsson, if he can keep that level up and just refine his game, find a home in Pittsburgh, it could really set things off for the Pittsburgh Penguins. They could get a reliable middle six winger in Johnsson for very cheap, right? He only signed for $800,000. So that would be perfect for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And when you look at him just in general, he fits the mold of Sullivan's favorite Penguins depth wingers over the years. Think Connor Sherry, 5'10", 195, fast guy, offensive upside. Can play the second power play unit. He's had some time on the penalty kill. The Devils tried to turn him into a penalty killer when he got traded to New Jersey. Didn't work out well. I don't know if that's an experiment the Penguins are going to want to try again or if they're just going to want him to play to his strengths. Considering all the penalty-killing forwards that they brought in, I already talked about some of them, Achari, Nieto, Eller. Drew O'Connor will hopefully have an elevated role in that area. I would say you just let Andreas Johnsson play to his strengths, the offensive side of the puck. He's not a player that would be top six caliber on every team, but his play style does match what we've seen in the past succeeds alongside Crosby and Malkin. Now, he's not going to be a guy that starts there or earns that spot right out of camp unless he takes Jake Gensel's position that's going to be vacated for the first handful of games, maybe a half dozen games, but it could allow the Penguins some much-needed injury insurance, and that's extremely important considering the injury history of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Johnsson is on a show-me contract this season, but if he is given a chance to revive his game, it could be the most underrated move of Kyle Dubas's entire offseason. That's going to do it for this episode of Penguins to Go. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Remember, you can find us on YouTube at Inside the Penguins or anywhere you get your podcast from. We'll see you guys next time.